people of the United States are not prepared, okay, for what's happening. The people in Argentina, on the other hand, have had ample practice at survival. Argentina is going to be one of the few countries that are prepared to make do and thrive during these very trying times.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is the podcast where we talk about all of those things, both international and psychological, that tend to get in the way of your living beyond your borders, if that's what you want to do. Jonathan Lockwood here, along with James Guzman. What's happening, James?
How you doing? What's going on?
Well, here in San Miguel de Allende, I understand that it's possibly tonight when House Hunters International is going to air their San Miguel de Allende episode.
Yeah, everybody's got to check that out. It's actually some people I work along with is the Coldwell Banker guys, and yeah, it should be really good.
Well, this is just a beautiful town. Americans and Canadians and people from all over the world love to move here. Mm-hmm. And the houses are always very impressive. When you come to this little colonial town that's just hundreds and hundreds of years old, it's always surprising to walk in the door of one of these old areas and then this unbelievable multi-million-dollar home opens up to you. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, they have, it looks just like a regular, well, sometimes they're very nice doors, but that's all you can see is just the front door and maybe a gate or something, and you walk past and it's just very nice, elegant houses with courtyards and everything else. So it's interesting.
Right. So it looks like that's airing tonight, and nobody's going to hear this until the following week.
That's true, yeah.
But there will be reruns, and you can search for it. Mm-hmm. So, here on the Borderless Podcast, it's, we try to make this about people who are interested in living beyond, their borders, like we always talk about. And the fact of the matter is, James and I both come from the United States. We've both lived outside of the United States. James more than I have. We both at this point live in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And the fact of the matter is, although we speak to people from all over the world, probably most of the people who listen to us are people who live in the United States, who would like to leave, but are frustrated in their abilities to do so. But our guest today is David Chu. David was born in Shanghai, China, and has worked as a licensed professional engineer and project manager for about 20 years throughout the U.S. He successfully managed multi-million-dollar projects in the energy power plant industry, and he has invented and designed several inventions, including one multi-million-dollar product. David is also a writer on geopolitics and economics and is an author of a self-published ebook in 2008 called No Foreclosures, Guerrilla Principles to Save Your Family and Stick It to the Banks. Recently, David published an article, Escape to Patagonia, to help people who are interested in relocating to one of the best safe havens in the world and one of the most beautiful places on earth. He permanently relocated to Argentina when he saw the handwriting on the wall and has lived in beautiful northern Patagonia since August 2008. He loves this enchanting region so much he wants to share it with the world. Welcome, David Chu.
Thank you, guys, for inviting me to your podcast.
So, David, you come from, as I stated, China. You were born in Shanghai, is that correct?
Yes, I was. I was born in 1965 during the tumultuous years leading up to the Cultural Revolution in China. So as a young child, I saw a lot, to say the least.
Okay. And what are some of your earliest memories that are relevant to us today?
I grew up in a very relatively free environment back then. China in the late 60s and early 70s was still, it was very idyllic. It was relatively free. Okay, I remember just having fun growing up as a child there in China. I remember teaching my first class, and that was a very proud moment that I had. But one of the things that your listeners may be interested to hear about was an incident that happened to me. I think this was 1972 or 71, I'm not sure. This is when President Nixon went to China. Do you guys remember that historic visit?
Yes, that was a big deal. He was the first president ever to go to China, or in many, many years, right?
Right, right. I remember looking up in the sky at that time and seeing this plane because in China at that time there were no commercial airlines, and so that Air Force One plane was very visible and it was very distinct. But the interesting story that I want to share with your audience is an incident that happened one night. It was my uncle who was taking care of me at that time. My parents were living in another place, another city. Anyways, as he was tucking me into bed, in walks in about 6 or 7, I think it was maybe 8 plainclothes policemen. And, in China at that time, nobody locks their doors because only criminals and counter-revolutionaries, would lock their doors. And so they came in and six of them walked to my right and 2 of them went to the left where there's a radio machine that looks like a jukebox, a jukebox, a very large thing where you can press buttons and this particular radio, when you press the buttons, it would select different channels. Okay, during the early 70s, you couldn't listen to broadcasts from Hong Kong or Taiwan. Okay, it was illegal. And long story short, the police needed a reason to arrest my uncle, and so one of them who was playing around with the radio said to my uncle, "Did you do this?" Meaning, did you select this channel? And of course, my uncle said no. And so, anyways, they took my uncle away. And as they were leaving the door, I stood up in the bed, 5-year-old kid, and shouted out and pointed at the man. I said, "He did it. He did it." And so that was a very interesting incident in my life. I mean, think about it. It's 5 years old. You get to confront face to face with a police state in the face, as it were, So that was a very interesting.
Well, I just have to ask you, what were the reasons? What was the justification for saying you couldn't listen to radio in Hong Kong or Taiwan?
Well, China to this day is communist, right?
Right.
Except, China today is more capitalist than the United States is.
Right.
I was in Shanghai in 2010. I was just blown away. Shanghai is like Las Vegas on steroids, okay, at nighttime. But at that time, when Mao was in power, they were very afraid of capitalism in the West, and so they didn't want the influence of the good life, as it were, to spill into China through radio. So they made listening to broadcasts from Hong Kong and from Taiwan illegal. Okay, does that kind of explain?
Oh yeah, I figured it was something like that. It's just, it's one of those things that probably a lot of us don't completely understand. Hong Kong is China, correct?
Well, Hong Kong up until 1997 was a British colony. Okay, the British took over Hong Kong and had a 99-year lease on Hong Kong, so it was part of the British Commonwealth, if you will. Okay, so it was separate from China. So in fact, you have on one side communist China, which at that time was very not free, and you got Hong Kong, which was totally free. I had my grandparents live in Hong Kong, and we of course lived in Shanghai. It was a completely different world. All right. So you at some point you described an experience that's just shocking to a lot of people, that there could be a police state so strong that they would arrest somebody for listening to the wrong radio station. They actually manufactured the evidence right in front of my eyes.
Right. They did. Yeah, they did it. It's possible. You knew that it was wrong, and at the same time, you were not in a position to recognize maybe the big picture. At what point do you feel like you really understood the big picture about your home country?
Well, that's a hard question. I don't think I ever thought about that. But I mean, when it happened, I knew it was wrong because I stood up and I pointed my finger at the policeman who manufactured the evidence. I said he did it. So I mean, I think every one of us, even as children, we understand what is right and what is wrong. I think that as we grow older, because of the mainstream media and so forth and so on, we tend to make excuses for what's happening. And for me, I'll tell you something. For me, the key note of what I'm after is truth and freedom. And that is one of the main reasons why I came to Argentina, was to find more freedom, So my experience in China helped me to realize that the United States, where I have lived for 20 years, I realized that was not what is advertised. It's not the Hollywood movies that a lot of people associate the United States with, the land of milk and honey. I facetiously call it the land of GMO milk and fake money at this point. But so I mean, I realized as I grew older that China was communist and very much a police state. Today China is very different. It's very materialistic, and very capitalistic. I mean, I don't think there's a city in the world that is more capitalistic and entrepreneurial than Shanghai. Okay, there are a million. If you want to be a millionaire, go to Shanghai, because you could do that as long as you don't talk about politics. As long as you don't criticize the current government, you're fine. But as soon as you step over that line, even to this day, you can be in big trouble.
Very interesting. But you did leave China. Why did you leave China?
That's another really interesting story. As I told you, my grandparents were living in Hong Kong at that time. My grandfather is a very generous man, and he had a small ship painting company that would paint the hulls of German ships, when they dock in Hong Kong port. And so he had an idea. He sent my father, both my parents are medical doctors, now retired. He sent my father an x-ray of his friend with some sort of problem. I don't remember what that problem was. And so he sent it to my father, who was living in a city called Kunming. It's in the interior part of China. Anyways, my father used that as a pretense because at that time, 1972-ish, you couldn't open your mouth and say, I want to go to Hong Kong, because that meant you wanted to escape China, okay, to the authorities. But with an excuse like his father was dying, my grandfather, he was able to use that as a pretense, as it were. And it took him about a whole year. And after a whole year, he had to go through all the bureaucracies. In China, we invented bureaucracies. And so he had to go through all these different levels, from local police all the way to the general of the province of Kunming, to get approval for myself. I was living in Shanghai at that time, my sister who was living with them, and him, but not my mother, because they didn't want to let my mother go, or we would never go back, right? So we were able to leave. And I, as a young kid, I remember this scene. It's almost like a movie. There's a bridge between China proper and Hong Kong. And I remember just being so thirsty because it was so hot. I could see my grandfather and my grandmother across the bridge on the other side, and he was holding a bottle of Johnny Walker Red Label. And it was very symbolic because in that bottle was cold, refreshing water, cold water. So it was like, here was my grandfather rescuing us from communism with freedom and a bottle of cold water. I mean, how Hollywood dish can it be, right?
Okay, so you were what? You were like 8 years old at this point?
Around 7, I think.
And you were able to get into Hong Kong?
Yeah, we were able to get into Hong Kong. And it took another year before the authorities in China finally allowed my mother to leave, in which case we then immediately left for Vancouver, Canada, because we have my aunts who lived in Vancouver. And so that's how I'm actually a Canadian citizen myself. And I grew up in Canada, went to university there, and so forth.
Yeah, we've heard Vancouver's a great place. We actually had a guy on just last week telling us that that was one. Was it Vancouver, right? Or was that Montreal?
Yeah.
No. He said it was one of his favorite places to be.
Vancouver is one of the most beautiful cosmopolitan cities in the world. Okay, the problem right now is the real estate. The average house in Vancouver, get this, cost $1 million.
Wow.
And it's all because of the rich people from Shanghai and elsewhere in China who are seeking a safe haven. So they look to Vancouver because Vancouver has a large Chinese population. And so they're just buying up real estate left and right.
Yeah, well, I heard that they have an expedited program especially made for the Chinese that come there and buy real estate, that they can get citizenship very quickly.
They terminated that program very recently. Yeah, but it's a beautiful city. My family, all my family except for my sister. My sister is a reporter in Toronto. All live in Vancouver, and it's one of the most beautiful places. If you guys haven't visited, you should try it someday.
That's what we've heard. So, David, you're an engineer by trade, right? Is that what your degree is in?
Yeah, I'm a professionally licensed mechanical engineer. I have a professional license from state of California. And I worked as a mechanical engineer and a project manager for about 20 years or so.
Okay. What was your multi-million-dollar product, if you don't mind our asking?
Pacific Bell or any of the utility companies, when they go in the manholes to service, they'll use a utility blower to blow air into the manhole so they can supply them with fresh air. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I was tasked by the boss of a company called Ramfan to come up with a product. He basically just sat down with him. He said, okay, this is what I want. It's about 12 inches, 12 inches, and 12 inches, kind of a, cube, about so many cubic feet per minute and so much head, so much horsepower. And that was it. All he gave me was just these airflow data. And he said, oh, go ahead and figure it out. It took me about a whole year to design, engineer, and finally figure out how to do this thing. It has made the company millions of dollars. The kicker was I was getting paid $36,000 US at that time, and even after a year of working on this, I had to do so much research on various processes of how to make this blower. Even after the year, he would not give me a pay raise. Oh. Can you believe that?
Well, it does sort of remind me of my background and my decision to want to work for myself as opposed to someone else.
You got it, my friend.
Right. So at some point you decided, David, that you would like to live outside of Canada and the U.S. And so what did you have a number of options on the table, or did you go right to Argentina?
Well, what happened was this. In 1998, I was working for a company in San Diego. What they did was they were the number one manufacturer, builder of a piece of equipment called air-cooled condensers, or ACC. They had a project in San Miguel de Tucumán, and it was not my project, but I was, shall we say, tasked to go there and babysit this project for 2 months because it was part of the contract that we were supposed to supply personnel there. Anyway, I didn't really want to go, to be honest with you. Like most people thought about Argentina as this third world, dirty, poor, which Argentina is to a certain degree. But when I arrived and when I visited Tucumán, San Miguel de Tucumán, I kind of fell in love with the city for a couple of reasons. Number one, I love an Indian food called samosa. It's a fried thing that has chickpeas and potatoes, okay? If you know Indian food, it's a very delicious food. In Argentina, they have something very similar. It's called empanadas, okay? It's made of meat, mostly beef. And San Miguel de Tucumán, turns out, is the place in Argentina to sample this Argentinian delicacy, and because they make the best empanadas in Argentina. And so I really fell in love with the empanadas right away. The second thing that I fell in love with were these beautiful mujeres, the beautiful women of San Miguel de Tucumán. I swear to you guys, 1 out of every 4 women that I pass on the streets look like a fashion model. I'm not kidding you. I don't know what it is that they drink or what it is that they eat, maybe besides the empanada, but the women were just incredibly beautiful, So I left, shortly thereafter and forgot about it. But when I decided that I wanted to leave the United States, I remembered Argentina. And so I went online and searched for beautiful places. And one place that always came up was St. Carlos de Bariloche. And this is a resort town. It's about 150,000 people. It's on a lake called the Nahuelhuape. Anyways, it literally is like Switzerland. Incredible beauty. Bariloche is like Lake Tahoe on steroids in terms of the incredible beauty. So that was how I was led to check out Argentina and Bariloche. I currently live about 2 hours south of Bariloche in an interesting area called El Bolsón. And El Bolsón is known for being the hippie capital of Argentina. Now, there are all a bunch of rich hippies because their small farms or chacras are worth a lot of money. And it's a beautiful place that I live here, so that's how I ended up where I am.
All right, so basically it was the empanadas and the chicks.
Yeah.
Why you went to Argentina. Asked and answered.
I like
Very
that.
Very good. I have a friend who tells me that Bariloche is her favorite place in the world. I've heard about it. I hear it's gorgeous there.
It truly is a hidden paradise that nobody knows too much about, I would like to introduce this area to more people because it is a wonderful place to, quote unquote, escape to and find a life that's truly amazing here.
So we're talking with David Chu, engineer, inventor, and author, originally born in Shanghai, moved to Hong Kong, then to Vancouver, spent 20 years in the United States, and has escaped to Patagonia. And we're going to talk to him a little bit about the reasons why you might consider Patagonia and Argentina in general as a great place to escape to. But right now, we're going to take a moment to thank one of our sponsors. Today's Borderless podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group. You know, as we find ourselves near the beginning of a whole new year, the Condescending Group encourages you to appreciate the special place we morally superior folks have in society. It's not that we think we're better than everyone else. It's just that we're vastly more intelligent and care more than everyone else. And we just think it would be good for you to take some time out and truly revel in the warm feelings of saintly preeminence. It's true that others encourage discussion of the world's important issues, and while that might seem proper, we recognize that it's just a waste of time, coming from those who are genetically stupid and honestly beneath us. So we suggest you stamp out discussion and debate with those who disagree with us in our altruistic hierarchy. When faced with a challenge, a simple condescending and sarcastic comment is all you need. Go to thecondescendinggroup.com. The Condescending Group. We care more than you. All right, we're back with David Chu, engineer, inventor, and author, the guy who hosts the website escapetopatagonia.com. So, David, let's get real concise to our listeners. And why would they consider moving to Argentina as a country and specifically to Patagonia? Why is it a good choice for them, perhaps?
You know, the world in general right now is going through a very difficult transition. I personally believe that we are in Great Depression 2 or GD2 that began in October 2008 with the financial crash that happened on Wall Street. And because of these economic and financial situations throughout the world, I believe that it's prudent to find a place that is relatively safe. You know, there are no safe places in the world, but there are places that are more safer than others, okay? And Argentina, most people don't know this, is actually the 8th largest country in the world, okay? And so there's a tremendous diversity in this country that spans, you know, from the subtropics up north in terms of the weather, down to the subarctic in the very south. So there's a whole range. I have specifically chosen northern Patagonia as a region because of the incredible natural resources that are available here. For example, water is a very critical need for living and for survival. We have, and we're blessed here with crystal clear lakes that are just fantastic. I mean, it's almost unbelievable until you see it. Argentina also is a very practical country. What I mean by that is that Argentinians have had to survive crises after crises. It's almost like every 10 years we go through some sort of financial crisis, you know, whether it's the 2001 default of our loans that precipitated a tremendous depression that happened. Argentinians have gotten used to it. You know, the joke here is that we eat crises for breakfast. You know, and so Argentinians are extremely practical, and I love that aspect of it. I've lived in the United States, like I said, for 20 years, and I can tell you this: that the people of the United States are not prepared, okay, for what's happening and what's going to happen, and that's rather sad. The people in Argentina, on the other hand, have had ample practice at survival, as it were, and so, you know, I think that Argentina is going to be one of the few countries that are prepared to make do and thrive during these very trying times. In fact, you know, Argentina about 100 years ago was a first world country on par with the United States, and we are, you know, in a position to improve our situation. Whereas I think that countries in Europe and in North America are in a position to lose their footing of where they are today as a first world country. So those are some of the reasons, you know, the natural resources and the practicality of the people that are in Argentina.
So I guess you're saying that if there's some sort of a currency collapse or something like that, well, I mean, it happens every couple of years in Argentina, so they're used to that.
Yeah, you know, it's nothing. It's nothing for us. You know,
Yeah.
we're so accustomed to it. We have an expression: duct tape and wire. You know, we can fix anything and make do as long as we have got duct tape and wire. You know,
Right. And well, Argentina has a long history of people that escape there from different types of turmoil throughout the world. Isn't that right?
you know, people say the United States is land of immigrants, right? Well, I tell you, Argentina is truly a nation of immigrants. Most people here are maybe one or two generations from their native homeland. Okay, so there are a lot of Italians, a lot of Spaniards, of course, from Spain. There's a lot of Germans here in this northern Patagonia region. There are a lot of Jewish people in Buenos Aires. So there's a whole mixture of immigrants, and Argentina, because of this background and history, tend to be very accommodating. You know, in terms of the problems, the racial problems that they have in Europe, for example, it's not existent here in Argentina. Mm. So that's a big plus too.
Wow. So, but you know, a lot of people see the government there as being problematic. What do you think about that?
Well, you know, I also believed that at the very, very beginning. But then as I kind of got into a little bit more, the current president, her name is Christina de Kirchner. She and her husband have been in the so-called Pink House, that's our White House, since 2003, okay? I have come to a different conclusion. I think that the corruption that the media and others have accused Argentina and of this president of is more overblown than anything else. You know, there is no country in the world that is not corrupt, right? I mean, there's no perfect government. What this government is it's a very nationalistic government, okay? And so that is being perceived as a impediment to what's been called the Washington Consensus, and the people in Buenos Aires, specifically the 1% business owners in Buenos Aires, who would like to have an Argentina that's modeled more along the lines of the United States. In fact, these people, these 1%ers, they have their second and third homes in Miami and in New York. So their allegiance is more towards the United States, and they would like Argentina to go back to the days of President Menem, who was very pro-United States and pro, so-called free markets and so forth and so on. And I have seen, I mean, when I was in Tucumán in 1998, I saw what Menem was like. There were many people begging on the streets, the dogs, many dogs on the streets. The taxi driver, this was a really interesting observation. I remember seeing taxi drivers in Tucumán in 1998 driving their taxis at nighttime without the lights on. Okay, why? They want to save a few drops of fuel because it was so scarce and so forth and so on. So I know what Argentina, under the so-called neoliberal policies and the Washington Consensus and free market, was like in 1998. And things have improved. Is it perfect? Definitely not. Could things improve?
I think that when people are criticizing the government, I think they're talking about capital controls. I know, for instance, when I used to work for a bank, there was a lot of people that they were unable to even get money into our bank because the Argentinian government won't let them take money out of the country. Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, but you also have to understand this. Argentinians are extremely smart people. The people that have money, okay, the 1%er, I read a statistic or a news piece that Argentinians hold the largest amount of U.S. dollars in cash of all the countries in the world. They have something like 350 billion U.S. dollars stashed away in deposit boxes in Uruguay, Chile, in Miami, and so forth and so on. So when you talk about capital control, it's the government's reaction to what I believe, this is my personal opinion, is the actions of the so-called economic hitman that want to change Argentina back to the old days of Menem, back to the days more friendly to the United States. So there's a kind of a financial war that's being waged, and the capital controls are this government's way of trying to deal with this situation.
With the situation of people that want to have cash internationally?
They have their cash in Russia. I mean, $350 billion stashed away in safety deposit boxes is a lot of money. Okay, so
yeah, I think it's great.
The government creates regulation rules, and the people circumvent them. Okay, that's how it works in Argentina. Argentinians are the greatest tax cheats in the world. Most businesses, I think all businesses, have two sets of books. One of them black, one of them white. The white book is taxed by RFIP, our version of the IRS, and the black is a real, cash flow situation. So there's rules and regulations, and Argentina is very bureaucratic, like China, but there's the reality of it, what's actually happening on the ground. Okay, so it's not really a big deal, to be honest with you. The people that want to move money out of the country, they do that.
Okay, so, it sounds like what you're talking about, that is to the credit of Argentina, is to the Argentinian citizens and not necessarily to the government.
No.
This is an important point then, because there have been so many problems with the currency and with the economy of Argentina. People have learned to adapt. Can you share with us some of the ways they've done that? What do they do to try and preserve some of the value of their savings and things like that?
You bring up a very good point. One of the key areas of investing, because we have pretty high inflation. I think it's running around 30% a year right now. They invest in land. Okay, they invest in property. They invest in estancias and chacras, and so because of that, our laws regarding private property is very much sacrosanct. What I mean by that is that there are no eminent domains and takings. I'm aware of these things in the United States because I worked in the gas pipeline business, and if a gas pipeline decides to go across your property and you don't want to sell, we can go to court and get a judge to do a legal thing called eminent domain and take over a portion of their land because we want the pipeline going through it. In Argentina, the government and the laws are such that they regard the private property rights pretty much untouchable because the politicians themselves invest in land. So they want to make sure that it's the rules are what they are to safeguard. So people that want to buy in Argentina, for example, foreigners, all they need is a passport to do so. In this area where I am, in the so-called Lake District of Patagonia, the government has put into enforcement some regulations and laws that prevent foreigners from buying more than 5,000 square meters, which is about an acre. So in terms of investments, land is a vehicle. Cars actually are also as an investment. So cars here are quite expensive. They're cars here that you and I would not touch in the United States that are actually being sold for $2,000 or $3,000 at junkyard quality. Okay, so cars are an investment vehicle. Businesses, if you're a business owner, and there are a lot of mom and pop shops, Argentina is still much geared towards the family, entrepreneur, as it were. And that's a very good thing. I like. The negative side, of course, is the inconvenience. If you want to buy something, you got to go to a couple of stores to do so, rather than one, Home Depot or Costco to do so. Another thing that's really interesting about Argentina is that it's a very protectionist country, and so when Sony or Samsung want to sell their LCD TVs and things like that, the government says, you know what, that's great, but you have to manufacture it here in Argentina. In fact, I'm sitting in front of my Samsung 32-inch that I just bought recently, and guess where it was made? It was made in Argentina, in the south. So we actually manufacture TVs, cars, refrigerators, freezers, washers. I mean, that's a very important point.
That's why it's more expensive.
Not necessarily. This 32-inch that I bought for 4,600 peso in US dollars, if you divide it by 10, it's around $400. Okay, is that expensive or?
Well, I mean, for instance, the cars that you were saying that were very expensive that you wouldn't touch. It's either there's several things that could go into that, right? You either have taxes, because you said it's a very nationalistic government. They're taxing all imports of cars, or else they're not allowing people to use international labor, so it's more expensive. Yes.
The way I would see it, it's more true cost as opposed to, I'm from China, the made in Chinese good, I think, are artificially depressed in terms of the actual costs. Okay. I mean, if you were to factor in what a worker in Shanghai should be paid for assembling that iPhone or iPad, the realistic price would probably double. Okay.
What does that mean? Should be paid?
The people that are working at those plants in Shanghai or near Shanghai that are assembling the iPhones and iPads are paid almost slave labor wages. Okay.
I thought being a slave means you don't get a wage.
Slave labor wages in quotes. It's not. It's the reason why Steve Jobs, God bless him, I actually admire that guy. Why he relocated all his manufacturing to China is to lower the cost. You know, the labor is very cheap in China, and so the point that I'm trying to make is that for a living wage, so-called, I think that all these very inexpensive products you're comparing, you know, Argentinian to, if they were, if these companies were paying real wages, they would be much more expensive too. So it is expensive here because we're paying living wages to the people that are actually making the products.
What is the living wage?
In terms of pesos?
At all? What does that mean?
You know, getting enough to take care of your basic needs, right? Rent a house if you need to, and your food and so forth and so on.
Well, so I guess it's just surprising to hear this because living wage is a term that we hear a lot, you know, and living wage, how is that determined? Is it determined by a market where there's supply and demand, or is it determined by supposedly caring people who are deciding on behalf of these people?
I think it's more of the first scenario.
Okay.
The people that they're working in China, I know the Chinese markets. I'm from China. You know, I've been to Shanghai recently. Okay. The wages that are being paid by Apple to the workers in these plants that are assembling these iPhones and iPads are not living wages. Okay, they're good wages compared to what the rest of China is getting, especially in the rural areas.
Okay, now we have to stop you there, David, because when you say that they're not paying them good wages, they're paying them more than they would ordinarily be paid in China. So isn't that good?
Sure it is. Sure it is. I don't want this interview to be a philosophical debate about market capitalism.
Okay.
But let's just get back to your point. Are things expensive relatively? The answer is yes and no. Okay. In terms of food and things like that, it's definitely not. I buy here organic food once a week that would cost probably 5 to 10 times more in the United States. Okay, comparable Whole Foods things, electronics, cars, things of that nature tend to be a little bit more expensive because of taxes and so forth. Okay, so yes, it is more expensive for certain things, but it's not for everything. Okay, so once you've bought your car, Argentinians on par, which is really interesting. Most people buy cars, buy houses, buy property with cash. Okay, in the United States, when you want to buy a car, when you want to buy a house, what do? You go to the bank, right? You get a loan, and then that's how you buy things. Here, people actually buy things with cash. Okay, so that's a very interesting dynamic that's taking place in not just in Argentina, but a lot of the South American countries as well.
Okay, you're listening to the Borderless Podcast. We're talking with David Chu, engineer, inventor, and author who escaped to Patagonia in Argentina. And he was originally from Shanghai, China. He talked about some of the awakenings he had at some point in his life about what it was like there. Lived in both Canada and the U.S. for 20 years. Or actually, he lived in the U.S. for 20 years, but he loves Argentina. He loves it because it's very culturally rich and diverse. He loves it because they tend to be more tolerant and accommodating to other cultures. There's great natural beauty and natural resources, and he loves it for the empanadas and the chicks. So, very interesting discussion here and very relevant for people. David expresses something that I think James and I both agree with, that most, certainly North Americans and maybe people in most parts of the world are not really prepared for what the future is likely to hold economically. And a place like Argentina is in a pretty good place, perhaps, to be prepared to it because they've gone through so many great economic difficulties themselves. And so they have figured out ways to try and protect themselves. One of those ways is with real estate. Now, David, in his Escape to Patagonia website, you offer some services. Why don't you share with us as concisely as possible what those services are?
We help people that are interested in relocating to Argentina, and specifically this northern Patagonia region. Two things. One is Argentina has a visa that is very, very easy to obtain. It's a temporary residency. You have to meet certain minimum monthly income. I think it's around $1,500 per month, and it's very easy to obtain our version of the green card. Okay. And so that is a service that we provide. So we do we help our clients in terms of applying for and getting their temporary residency in Argentina. And the other thing that we do is that we provide a relocation service specifically to this area of the northern Patagonia region for people that want to come and either check it out or that want to permanently move down here. We have a lot of expats from the United States, from England, from Australia, that are living in this area here. So it's a very multicultural place to escape to.
Now, what about this? Let's get an idea. We were talking with somebody in the Dominican Republic recently, and we were trying to get an idea from him about what it would cost. And I know there's always a range to purchase a home and to live in his region. And of course, the recommendation is always to, come there and check it out, usually rent for a while. And at the same time, people might like to know, should Patagonia be a region where they'd like to relocate? They'd like some idea about what homes do cost there. Can you provide a range for us, David?
Sure. In this area here in northern Patagonia, it is actually quite expensive relative to the rest of the country. We have a region up north called the Mendoza area. It's the wine country of Argentina that are much, much less expensive. And if people go to my article, Escape to Patagonia, which they can go to escapetopatagonia.com, and there's a link there. It describes about these various areas throughout Argentina. But around here, because of the incredible lakes that we have, it's very special. I think I was talking with James last time and asking him if he remember watching the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with Robert Redford and Paul Newman, and he didn't. But maybe you Jonathan, might remember that movie. Anyways, Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, for those of your listeners who don't know, were a bunch of bank robbers who escaped the United States because it was getting too hot for them. And they traveled to South America. One of the places, interestingly enough, that they went to is a place called Cholila. And it's one of the most beautiful places on this planet. Because this area is geared towards organic food production, organic fruits, vegetables, it's about roughly, this is just roughly, it's about $50,000 US per hectare. An hectare is about 2.5 acres. So you're looking around somewhere around 20 to 25,000 US per acre, which is quite expensive. Okay, and there's a reason why. It's much sought after, and it's very fertile, and it's the environment here is just gorgeous. I mean, this area Cholila is not known, but a lot of Yankee fly fishermen, they specifically fly into this town to go fly fishing around now and February, and live in these beautiful cabañas that are literally mansions, on the lakes. And so it is expensive here. In Mendoza, it's less expensive. So yeah, it varies quite a lot. But what I just kind of gave you was more buying a property that's more of a farming area. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I have a question we usually ask people. If somebody was in the United States and maybe they're thinking about, coming down there, maybe starting a new life, whether it's in Argentina or wherever, what is the best piece of advice that you would give them?
I think that the first thing they need to do is go check out the destination, wherever it is that they want to go to, number one. There is no amount of research reading off the internet that will supplant the actual on-the-ground experience. So that would be my number one advice to anybody who's thinking about relocating is get your passport ready. If you haven't got one, go get a passport. If it's less than 6 months that's going to expire, go get it renewed, get a new passport, and go check it out. Fly down to wherever. And a lot of expats like to go to places and kind of congregate around each other. That, I think, diminishes the experience, the cultural experience that one can receive by actually going into these places and just exploring it yourself, and finding out what it's like to live in a place like this area here, for example.
His name is David Chu. He's an engineer, inventor, and author. His website, if you go over to escapetopatagonia.com, you can read his article that is entitled Escape to Patagonia and find out more about it. And then you'll be right at the website there and can see the variety of services he offers to people who might be interested in moving there. David Chu, thank you so much for being on the Borderless podcast.
Thank you guys for having me on your
You
broadcast.
bet, David. Thanks very much. Okay, so that was an interesting Borderless podcast.
Yeah, it's David Chu. He's lived some different places. It looks like he's gone through several different parts of his life where he's come to new understanding, and now he's very comfortable down there in Argentina. So
right. So we should just address this because we haven't really had something like this on the Borderless podcast yet, but there's a little bit of a controversy in there. And so I'm going to personally consider it a challenge to myself to find people like this, people who have come to appreciate, for instance, the situation like the police state in China, like he did, and some of the crazy stuff that he experienced, how he's come to see how things have changed greatly in the United States for the worse as far as freedom and economic opportunity, and who still uses terms like a living wage.
Yeah. I just, I don't know, maybe, there's a lot of people that use that word, and I don't know. I'm not sure what, maybe he... Yeah,
I care about people. I want people to do well. But if you're telling me that a company comes into a country and they're not paying as much as they quote unquote should be,
right,
and yet they're paying a great deal more than anyone else in the country is paying,
right,
they're helping people, they're uplifting people.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I guess I'm just curious about how a person can arrive at that.
Well,
conclusion.
the reason I was questioning him on that is because people throw out terms like living wage and slave wage and things like that. And, actually they don't really have a definition. Whatever wage that you're making is determined by the supply and demand of the market, of what the value that you're bringing to the company. If, you're supplying something, whatever the value that you're adding to the company is valued highly, then you're going to get paid that.
And anything else is you talk about a manipulation of the market.
Right.
Right. In the end, it ends up being a bad thing in most cases.
Well, it creates unemployment. If everybody is getting paid whatever. And another thing is that it's completely subjective what a living wage is, as far as I see it. Right. So if everybody throughout an economy is getting paid $70,000 a year, then there's going to be a lot of jobs that just aren't there. And if you can't add that amount to somebody else, then you're going to be unemployed.
So in any event, David Chu has lived a life and has experienced many things that I certainly never have.
Absolutely.
And so I appreciate being able to have a guest like that on the Borderless podcast, because the fact of the matter is, even though we have different ideas and philosophies about these things, he is offering a valid service to people who, like him, wanted to get out of the United States and have a different kind of life. And so escapetopatagonia.com is a worthy website to go to, and maybe you can find out more about his reasons for loving that area. Argentina is definitely one of the places on the map there for people who are interested in getting out, and he can offer you some services that will be right for you. Now, as far as the Borderless podcast, as always, we would really love you if you would go to iTunes and you would both rate us with a star and give us a little review.
No, we hope for more than a star.
Well, I mean, by a star rating.
Yeah, star rating.
Hopefully it's 5.
Yeah.
But a review also, just a sentence or two, something like that.
Yeah.
And also, if you like it, subscribe to it too, because all of these things help us and helps distribute the Borderless podcast to more and more people. What else can we do, James?
Yeah, and that's it. Thanks for listening, and just go to the website, and you have the join here button right there at the top, and you can get on the email list to get all the new shows when they come out. And if you'd like, you can join us on our private Facebook group as well. And you can write to different people that have been on the podcast or ourselves here, and we can help each other out.
Okay, so borderlesspodcast.com, click on join now. Thanks so much for listening, and there'll be a new Borderless podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast. traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.